The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I scrubbed the men's bathroom floor for the third time this week. My knees were raw, my hands cracked from the industrial cleaning chemicals, and my designer manicure, the last remnant of my former life, was completely destroyed. 6 months ago, I was Charlotte Blackwood, heiress to Blackwood Industries' $2 billion empire. Today, I was just Charlie the rookie, the girl everyone loved to humiliate. "Charlie, get your ass over here!" Linda Morrison's voice cut through the office like a blade. She was the regional operations manager, a woman in her late 40s who had clawed her way up the corporate ladder by stepping on everyone beneath her. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and sharp business suits couldn't hide the cruelty in her eyes that seemed to light up every time she found a new way to torment me. I dropped the mop and hurried to her corner office, my cheap polyester uniform still damp from the bathroom cleaning. The contrast couldn't have been starker, her sitting behind a mahogany desk worth more than most people's cars, me standing there like a servant waiting for orders. "Yes, ma'am." I kept my voice steady, professional. It was a skill I'd learned over these past months. Never let them see you break. Linda didn't even look up from her computer screen. "The Johnson presentation is a disaster, completely worthless. I need you to redo the entire PowerPoint by tomorrow morning." My heart sank. I'd spent the entire weekend working on that presentation, researching market trends, analyzing competitor data, creating detailed financial projections. It was actually brilliant work, the kind of strategic thinking that my MBA from Wharton had prepared me for. But Linda had a habit of taking credit for my best work while publicly destroying anything that might make me look competent. "Ma'am, I worked really hard on that presentation. Could you tell me specifically what needs to be changed?" Before I tell you exactly how her next words became the catalyst for the most spectacular corporate meltdown in our company's history, could you take a second to hit that like button and subscribe? Because what I'm about to share will show you how a single moment of workplace cruelty can trigger a chain reaction worth $200 million in consequences. And trust me, you'll want to see every detail of how one woman's toxic behavior destroyed not just her career, but the careers of everyone who enabled her. Linda finally looked up, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. "Hard work? Charlie, sweetie, this is garbage. Complete and utter garbage. You clearly don't understand the first thing about business strategy." She stood up and walked around her desk, picking up the printed presentation from her coffee table. Without warning, she threw it directly at me. Pages scattered across the floor, months of research floating down like confetti. "Pick it up," she commanded. "Pick up your worthless work and get out of my sight. And next time, maybe try to remember that you're just a rookie here. Nobody cares about your opinions or your little college theories." I knelt down to gather the papers, my face burning with humiliation. Through the glass walls of her office, I could see other employees watching, some with sympathy, others with that uncomfortable mixture of relief and guilt that comes from witnessing someone else's public destruction. Karen from accounting quickly looked away. Steve from marketing suddenly found his computer screen fascinating. This was Linda's favorite game, public humiliation as performance art. "You know what?" Linda's voice rose, ensuring that half the office could hear her. "Since you seem to think you're too good for basic tasks, maybe you need a reminder of your place here. Go clean the executive bathroom on the 15th floor. And I mean clean it properly. Toilets, urinals, floors, everything. Maybe some honest work will teach you the value of humility." The executive bathroom. The most humiliating assignment possible. It was where the senior executives, including my own father, conducted informal meetings while relieving themselves. The thought of scrubbing toilets that my own family used, while they remained completely unaware of my identity, was almost too much to bear. "Yes, ma'am," I whispered, still gathering the scattered pages. "I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. Could you speak up so everyone can hear your response?" My hands tightened on the papers. This was it. This was the moment where most people would snap, would quit, would finally fight back. But I had a plan that was bigger than my pride, bigger than this moment of humiliation. "Yes, ma'am. I'll clean the executive bathroom right away." Linda's smile was triumphant. "Good girl. Maybe there's hope for you yet." I walked to the supply closet with as much dignity as I could muster. ignoring the whispers and sideways glances from my coworkers. As I loaded the cleaning cart with supplies, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jessica. "Still playing undercover boss? Dad must be wondering where you've been hiding." If only she knew. If only any of them knew that the girl they were watching scrub toilets was worth more than their annual salaries combined. But that was exactly the point of this experiment. When I'd graduated from Wharton 6 months ago, my father had offered me a corner office and a VP title. Instead, I'd convinced him to let me start at the bottom, to really understand how the company operated at ground level. "I want to earn my place," I'd told him. "I want to know what it's really like for the people who make this company run." He'd been skeptical but proud of my work ethic. We'd created a false identity, Charlotte Baker instead of Charlotte Blackwood, a recent business school graduate with no family connections. My father had personally ensured that my real identity was sealed in HR files that only he and the chief legal officer could access. Not even Linda's boss knew who I really was. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like an eternity. As the doors opened onto the executive level, I was struck by the stark contrast to the cubicle farm where I'd spent the last 6 months. Here, everything was marble and mahogany, crystal and leather. The kind of luxury I'd grown up with but had almost forgotten existed during my time in the trenches. The executive bathroom was, predictably, immaculate. It barely needed cleaning at all. This wasn't about hygiene. This was about power. Linda wanted me on my knees, scrubbing toilets, knowing that other executives might walk in and see me at my lowest point. I was halfway through cleaning the second stall when my phone rang. The ringtone, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, was one I'd programmed specifically for my father's calls. I almost didn't answer it. The last thing I needed was for him to hear the echo of the bathroom and start asking questions. But something made me pick up. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was just perfect timing. "Hello? Charlotte, sweetheart. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you all day." I glanced around the empty bathroom, then made a decision that would change everything. "I'm at work, Dad. Actually, I'm cleaning the executive bathroom on the 15th floor." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "I said I'm cleaning the bathroom. Linda Morrison, my supervisor, assigned me to scrub toilets as punishment for doing work that was apparently worthless garbage." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear the gears turning in my father's head. Richard Blackwood hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by being slow to connect dots. Linda Morrison, regional operations manager? That's the one. And she has my daughter cleaning toilets. Among other things. "Dad, the culture here is toxic. The way management treats lower-level employees is absolutely appalling. The abuse, the humiliation, the complete disregard for human dignity. If you saw what I've experienced these past 6 months, I want you in my office. Now." "Dad, I can't just—" "Charlotte." His voice had taken on that tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant the discussion was over. "I want you in my office in 15 minutes. We're having a conversation, and then we're having several other conversations with some people who are about to have very bad days." I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My hair was escaping from its ponytail, my uniform was stained with cleaning chemicals, and my hands were raw and red. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be. A nobody, a rookie, someone who didn't matter. Perfect. "I'll be right up, Dad." I left the cleaning supplies exactly where they were and walked to the elevator. As I rode up to the 20th floor, the executive level where I'd spent countless childhood afternoons playing in my father's office, I felt something shifting inside me. The humiliation was transforming into something else, something powerful. The elevator doors opened directly into the reception area of Blackwood Industries' executive suite. Margaret, my father's assistant for the past 15 years, looked up from her desk with a polite but distant smile. The same smile she'd given me 100 times over the past 6 months when I'd delivered documents or cleaned the conference rooms. "Excuse me, miss, but this floor is restricted to—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. "Charlotte? Oh my God, Charlotte, what are you doing here dressed like— What happened to you?" "Hello, Margaret." Is my father available? She was already reaching for her phone. Mr. Blackwood? Your daughter is here to see you. Yes, sir, right away. The heavy oak doors to my father's office swung open, and there he was. Richard Blackwood, CEO and founder of Blackwood Industries, looking every inch the billionaire businessman in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. But when he saw me, really saw me, his expression transformed from professional courtesy to barely contained fury. Jesus Christ, Charlotte. Look at you. I glanced down at my stained uniform, my ruined hands, my disheveled appearance. This is what 6 months of character building looks like, Dad. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I'd done homework as a child while he worked late into the evening. Sit. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about Linda's systematic campaign of humiliation, about being forced to work weekends without pay while she took credit for my projects, about the sexual harassment I'd witnessed other female employees endure in silence, about the racial discrimination that was rampant but carefully hidden from upper management, about the culture of fear that kept everyone quiet while a handful of middle managers abused their power with impunity. My father listened without interruption, his jaw tightening with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. 6 months, he finally said. You've endured this for 6 months. I wanted to understand. You wanted to understand. And instead you discovered that we've been harboring a nest of vipers. He picked up his phone. Margaret, I need you to call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. All board members, no exceptions. And I need you to get me Linda Morrison's complete personnel file, along with files for everyone in her department. He hung up and looked at me with a mixture of pride and anger that I'd never seen before. Charlotte, what you've done, documenting this culture, exposing these abuses, this is the kind of leadership this company needs. But first, we're going to deal with the cancer that's been growing in our organization. What are you going to do? His smile was cold, calculating. It was the expression that had made him legendary in business circles. The look that meant someone was about to learn a very expensive lesson. We're going to give Linda Morrison and her enablers exactly what they deserve. But first, you're going to go back downstairs. Dad, trust me. You're going to finish your shift. Act like nothing has happened. Let Linda continue being herself. Because in about 2 hours, we're going to have a very public conversation about workplace culture. And I want to make sure everyone gets to see exactly who they've been working for. I understood immediately. This wasn't just about firing Linda Morrison. This was about sending a message to the entire organization. This was about making sure that every employee, from the janitors to the executives, understood that the culture was changing permanently. I stood up, smoothing down my wrinkled uniform. How long do I have to keep up the act? Until 4 p.m. Then you're going to witness the most expensive corporate lesson in our company's history. I rode the elevator back down to the 10th floor, my mind racing with anticipation. When I walked back into the main office area, Linda was waiting for me with her arms crossed and that familiar sneer on her face. Well, well, well. Look who decided to take an extended break from her cleaning duties. I'm sorry, ma'am. I had a phone call. A phone call? Her voice rose, attracting the attention of nearby cubicles. On company time? While you were supposed to be working? Yes, ma'am. Give me your phone. I hesitated. This was going too far, even for Linda. Personal phones were personal property, and she had no legal right to confiscate it. I said, give me your phone, rookie. Now. The office had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching, waiting to see if I would finally push back, finally stand up for myself. Instead, I pulled out my iPhone and handed it to her. Linda's eyes lit up as she looked at the expensive device. Well, well, this is quite the fancy phone for someone making minimum wage. How exactly does a poor college graduate afford the latest iPhone? She was fishing, looking for any excuse to humiliate me further. But she had no idea that she was walking directly into a trap. I saved up for it, ma'am. Saved up? She laughed, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. On what you make here? I don't think so, sweetheart. More likely you've got a sugar daddy paying for your toys. The implication hung in the air like poison. Several people gasped. This wasn't just workplace harassment anymore. This was character assassination. Ma'am, Don't ma'am me, you lying little gold digger. You know what? I think you're stealing from this company. I think you're running some kind of scam, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. She turned to address the entire office. Everyone listen up. Our little rookie here has been lying to us. Expensive phone, designer clothes hiding under that cheap uniform. She's been playing games with us. I looked around the office at the faces of my co-workers. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few actually seemed to be enjoying the show. These were people I'd worked alongside for 6 months, people who'd watched me be humiliated day after day without ever speaking up. I want you to clean out your desk, Linda continued. You're fired. Security will escort you out. Ma'am, please, save it. I'm calling security right now. She picked up her desk phone and dialed the extension for building security. Yes, this is Linda Morrison. I need security up here immediately. We have a situation with an employee who needs to be escorted from the building. As she hung up, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, and my anticipation spike simultaneously. It was 3:45 p.m. 15 minutes until my father's deadline. 15 minutes until Linda Morrison learned exactly who she'd been tormenting for the past 6 months. You can't just fire me without cause, I said quietly. Linda's laugh was sharp and cruel. Honey, I can fire you for any reason I want. This is an at-will employment state, and I have plenty of reasons. Insubordination, suspected theft, lying on your application? Take your pick. The security guards arrived. 2 men I recognized from the lobby who'd always been polite when I'd walked past them each morning. They looked uncomfortable with the situation. Ma'am, what seems to be the problem? The older guard asked. This employee needs to be removed immediately. She's been stealing and lying, and I want her out of the building now. One of the guards looked at me with something like sympathy. Miss, do you have any personal items at your desk? I nodded toward my small cubicle, where I'd kept a few meaningless personal items. A coffee mug, a small plant, some pens. Nothing important. Nothing that mattered. You have 5 minutes to collect your things, Linda announced. And I'll be watching every move you make. I walked to my desk with as much dignity as I could muster, aware that 30 pairs of eyes were tracking my every movement. As I put my few possessions into a small cardboard box, I caught sight of the clock on my computer screen. 3:52 p.m. 8 minutes. Hurry up, Linda snapped. I don't have all day to babysit a thief. I finished packing my things and stood up, holding the small box that represented 6 months of my life. 6 months of humiliation, abuse, and education. 6 months that were about to pay dividends that Linda Morrison couldn't even imagine. Let's go, one of the security guards said gently. We'll escort you to the elevator. As we walked toward the elevator bank, Linda followed behind us, clearly enjoying her moment of triumph. Let this be a lesson to everyone, she announced to the office. This is what happens when you lie and steal from Blackwood Industries. This company has zero tolerance for dishonesty. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. The elevator arrived, and as the doors opened, I heard something that made my heart race. The distinct ding of the executive elevator, the private elevator that served only the 20th floor, the elevator my father used. Wait, Linda said suddenly, her voice sharp with suspicion. Why is the executive elevator moving? We didn't call for it. The doors to the executive elevator opened, and my father stepped out. Not Richard Blackwood, the loving father, but Richard Blackwood, the CEO, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled fury in a $3,000 suit, flanked by Margaret and 2 other executives I recognized as the chief legal officer and the head of human resources. The entire office fell silent. My father's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. Me standing with security guards, holding a box of personal belongings, my uniform still stained from cleaning toilets. Linda standing behind me with that triumphant sneer still frozen on her face. 30 employees watching in stunned silence. Well, my father said, his voice carrying easily across the silent office. This is interesting. Linda stepped forward, clearly believing she was about to receive praise for her vigilant protection of company assets. Mr. Blackwood, sir, I was just handling a personnel issue. This employee was caught stealing and lying. So I had her terminated and escorted out. Stealing? My father repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. And lying. Yes, sir. She claimed she couldn't afford expensive things, but she has a high-end phone, and I suspect she's been running some kind of scam. My father nodded slowly, then looked directly at me. And you are? This was it. The moment 6 months of planning and patience had been building toward. I looked directly into his eyes and smiled. Charlotte Blackwood, sir. Your daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. I could literally hear people's jaws dropping, the soft gasps of recognition, the whispered, "Oh my God," from someone in the back of the room. Linda's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, absolute terror. That's impossible, she whispered. You're nobody. You're a rookie. My father stepped forward, and I could see the controlled fury radiating from him like heat waves. Linda Morrison, Regional Operations Manager, 15 years with this company, glowing performance reviews, and apparently, a complete failure of character judgment. He turned to address the entire office, his voice carrying the authority that had built a billion-dollar empire. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Charlotte Blackwood, my daughter, heir to 51% of this company and holder of an MBA from Wharton with highest honors. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and whispers. I could see people frantically trying to remember every interaction they'd had with me over the past 6 months. Every moment they'd watched Linda humiliate me without speaking up. For the past 6 months, my father continued, Charlotte has been conducting an undercover assessment of our corporate culture at the operational level. What she discovered has been illuminating. Linda was backing away slowly, her face pale as paper. Mr. Blackwood, I had no idea. If I had known... If you had known what, Linda? If you had known she was my daughter, you would have treated her with respect. You would have valued her contributions. You would have recognized her obvious intelligence and potential. Because that tells me everything I need to know about your character. You believe that respect is something to be earned through connections rather than through basic human dignity. You believe that someone's value is determined by their last name rather than their contributions. He pulled out his phone and showed it to Linda. I've been listening to a recording of today's events. My daughter called me while she was cleaning toilets. Toilets you assigned her to clean as punishment for doing excellent work that you later took credit for. Linda's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the nearest chair, her triumphant expression completely gone. But that's not all, my father continued. Because Charlotte's 6 months here wasn't just about testing one manager. It was about testing our entire organizational culture. And frankly, most of you failed. He looked around the room at the faces of my former coworkers. How many of you witnessed the daily humiliation of someone you believed to be a vulnerable young employee? How many of you saw clear workplace harassment and said nothing? How many of you participated in the bullying, either actively or through your silence? The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Linda, you're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. The same security you just used to humiliate my daughter. Your final paycheck will be reduced by the amount of wages you stole from employees you forced to work unpaid overtime. Our legal team will be reviewing every decision you've made over the past 5 years. And if we find evidence of systematic discrimination or harassment, you'll be hearing from our lawyers. Linda started to cry. Not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity and fear. Please, Mr. Blackwood, I have a mortgage. I have children. I need this job. My father's expression didn't soften even slightly. You should have thought about that before you decided to torture my daughter for 6 months. You should have thought about that before you created a toxic work environment that drives away good employees and protects bad managers. He turned to the chief legal officer. I want a full investigation into Linda's department. Every personnel decision, every performance review, every complaint that was filed and ignored. And I want it completed within 2 weeks. Then he looked at me, and for the first time since he'd arrived, his expression softened slightly. Charlotte, I believe you have some things to say to your former colleagues. I stepped forward, still holding my box of belongings, still wearing my stained uniform. But something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't the powerless rookie anymore. I was Charlotte Blackwood, and I had 6 months of observations to share. For 6 months, I began, my voice steady and clear. I've worked alongside all of you. I've seen how this department really operates. I've witnessed harassment that would make your stomachs turn. I've seen discrimination that would shock you. I've watched good employees quit because they couldn't take the abuse anymore. I looked directly at Karen from accounting, who had watched my humiliation from her desk just an hour earlier. I've also seen good people stay silent when they should have spoken up. People who knew what was happening was wrong but were too afraid to risk their own positions to help someone they thought was powerless. Karen's face flushed red, and she looked down at her desk. But I've also seen a few people who showed kindness even when they thought it didn't matter, who offered help even when they thought I was nobody important. Those people will be remembered when we rebuild this department. My father stepped forward again. And we will be rebuilding. Linda's termination is just the beginning. Over the next month, every manager in this department will be evaluated. Those who created or enabled a toxic culture will be removed. Those who have demonstrated integrity and leadership will be promoted. He paused, looking around the room. As for the rest of you, your futures with this company will depend entirely on how you conduct yourselves moving forward. Because make no mistake, we will be watching, and we will remember. The security guards, the same ones who had been escorting me out just minutes earlier, now approached Linda. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your personal items and come with us." Linda looked around the room desperately, as if someone might step forward to defend her. No one did. The same colleagues who had laughed at her cruel jokes and enabled her behavior through their silence now avoided her eyes completely. As Linda was escorted out, clutching a box of her own belongings, she looked back at me one last time. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "You tricked us. You lied about who you were." I met her eyes steadily. "I never lied about anything that mattered. I told you I was a recent business school graduate. I am. I told you I wanted to learn the business from the ground up. I did. The only thing I didn't tell you was my last name. And that shouldn't have mattered if you had treated me with basic human decency." The elevator doors closed on Linda's tear-streaked face, and the office remained in stunned silence. My father surveyed the room one more time before speaking. "Charlotte, I believe you have work to finish, but not the kind Linda assigned you." He turned to Margaret. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the week. We're going to be very busy." As my father and the executives headed back to the 20th floor, I was left standing in front of 30 shocked colleagues. The weight of 6 months of suppressed authority settled on my shoulders like a familiar coat. "I know you're all processing this," I said, setting down my box of belongings. "But we have work to do. Real work. Starting now." Karen from accounting finally looked up. Ms. Blackwood, I'm so sorry. I wanted to help, but I was afraid." "I understand fear, Karen. But fear of standing up for what's right is what allowed this culture to fester." I walked to Linda's former office, my cheap shoes clicking on the polished floor. But understanding isn't the same as excusing. I turned back to face the room. "Here's what's going to happen. Everyone who witnessed harassment and said nothing will be required to attend mandatory ethics training. Everyone who participated in the bullying will be on probation pending review. And everyone who showed kindness, even small gestures when they thought it didn't matter, will be considered for advancement opportunities." Steve from marketing raised his hand tentatively. "What about our current projects? The Johnson presentation?" I couldn't help but smile. "You mean the worthless garbage I created? We'll be presenting it to the board next week, without Linda's name on it this time." Over the next 3 days, the investigation my father ordered revealed the true scope of the corruption. It wasn't just Linda. It was an entire network of middle managers who had created a culture of fear and favoritism throughout multiple departments. They protected each other, covered for each other's mistakes, and systematically drove out anyone who threatened their little kingdom. On Thursday morning, I was in my father's office reviewing the investigation results when Margaret buzzed in. "Sir, we have a situation. Linda Morrison is in the lobby with a lawyer, demanding to speak with you." My father and I exchanged glances. "Send them up," he said. 15 minutes later, Linda walked into the office flanked by a nervous-looking attorney in an ill-fitting suit. She'd clearly been crying for days. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "Mr. Blackwood," the lawyer began, "my client believes her termination was wrongful. She was dismissed without proper cause or due process." "She was dismissed for cause," my father interrupted. "Multiple causes, actually. Harassment, theft of intellectual property, wage theft, and creating a hostile work environment. My client had no way of knowing she was mistreating your daughter. And that's exactly the problem," I interjected, standing up from my chair. "She mistreated me because she thought I was powerless, because she thought there would be no consequences. The fact that I'm his daughter is irrelevant. What she did was wrong regardless of who I am." Linda finally spoke, her voice desperate. "Charlotte, please. I made mistakes, I know that. But I don't deserve to lose everything. I have children, a mortgage. I've worked here for 15 years. You've abused employees here for 15 years, I corrected. "The investigation found complaints going back to your first promotion to supervisor. Complaints that were buried, ignored, or explained away." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "What kind of complaints?" My father opened a thick folder on his desk. "Sexual harassment of junior female employees, racial discrimination in hiring practices, systematic wage theft through unpaid overtime, retaliation against employees who filed complaints, theft of intellectual property by taking credit for subordinates' work." "Should I continue?" Linda's face went white. "Those complaints were investigated. They were unfounded. They were investigated by your friends in HR," I said. "Friends who are also being terminated today." As if on cue, Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, the board members are arriving for the emergency meeting." My father stood up. "Gentlemen, this meeting is over. Linda, your termination stands. If you'd like to challenge it in court, we welcome the opportunity to present our evidence publicly." As they were escorted out, Linda turned back one last time. "You destroyed my life for 6 months of hurt feelings?" I looked at her with something approaching pity. "I documented 15 years of systematic abuse. The 6 months you hurt me was just the evidence we needed to stop you from hurting anyone else." The board meeting that afternoon was unlike anything in the company's history. My father presented the investigation findings, the recorded conversations, and the testimonies of multiple employees who had finally found the courage to speak up. "The financial impact has been substantial," the chief financial officer reported. "We estimate that Linda's department had a 30% higher turnover rate than the company average. The cost of constant recruitment, training, and lost productivity is approximately $2.3 million annually." Board member Harrison Fitzgerald, a stern man in his 70s, looked directly at me. "Charlotte, what's your recommendation for addressing this cultural failure?" I'd been waiting for this question. "Complete restructuring. We eliminate the middle management layer that enabled this behavior. We implement anonymous reporting systems with external oversight. We tie all management bonuses to cultural metrics, not just financial ones. And we create a position for Chief Culture Officer with direct board oversight." "That's a significant investment," another board member noted. "The cost of maintaining the status quo is higher," I replied. "We've lost talented employees, we're facing potential lawsuits, and our reputation is at risk. The investment in culture isn't an expense. It's insurance against future liability." My father leaned forward. "Charlotte, would you be interested in serving as our first Chief Culture Officer?" The room fell silent. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Not just the past 6 months, but my entire education and preparation for leadership. "Yes, but with conditions. I want full authority to investigate and address cultural issues at every level. I want a direct reporting line to the board, not filtered through other executives. And I want the ability to implement changes without interference from department heads who might resist reform." The vote was unanimous. Over the following weeks, the transformation was dramatic. We terminated not just Linda, but 6 other managers who had enabled or participated in the toxic culture. We promoted several junior employees who had demonstrated integrity during my undercover period. We implemented new policies that protected whistleblowers and created multiple channels for reporting problems. The most satisfying moment came 3 weeks later when I received a call from Sarah Martinez, a junior analyst who had quit Linda's department 2 months before my father's intervention. "Ms. Blackwood? I heard about what happened, about what you did. I wanted you to know. Linda made my life hell for 8 months. She took credit for my research. She humiliated me in meetings. She made me work weekends without pay. I finally quit because I couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry you went through that, Sarah. Would you be interested in coming back? We have several positions open in the restructured department. Actually, I'd love to. But I also wanted to tell you something else. Linda wasn't just stealing from current employees. She was stealing ideas from former employees too. She's been taking credit for projects developed by people who left years ago. This revelation opened an entirely new investigation. We discovered that Linda had built her entire reputation on stolen intellectual property. Patents filed under the company's name were based on research done by employees Linda had driven away. Marketing campaigns she'd claimed credit for were actually developed by teams she'd disbanded. The financial impact was staggering. We identified over $50 million in value that Linda had essentially stolen through intellectual property theft and the loss of talented employees who'd taken their skills to competitors. But the personal vindication came when we received a letter from Marcus Thompson, a former employee who'd left 3 years earlier. "Dear Ms. Blackwood," the letter read, "I heard through professional networks about the changes at Blackwood Industries. I wanted you to know that Linda Morrison destroyed my career 3 years ago. I developed a new product line that would have generated millions in revenue. Linda stole my research, fired me for performance issues, and took full credit for my work. I was blacklisted from the industry because of her false accusations. If there's any way I can help with your investigation, please contact me." We contacted Marcus immediately. His testimony, combined with the documentation he'd kept, provided the final piece we needed to file criminal charges against Linda for fraud and intellectual property theft. The day we announced the charges, I was back in that 10th floor office. Not as a rookie cleaner, but as the chief culture officer, addressing the same employees who had watched my humiliation 6 months earlier. "Today marks the final chapter of an old story and the beginning of a new one," I told them. "Linda Morrison has been charged with fraud, intellectual property theft, and conspiracy. But this isn't about revenge. It's about justice and prevention." I looked around the room at faces that had changed dramatically over the past month. Karen from accounting had been promoted to department head. Steve from marketing was leading the team developing Marcus Thompson's stolen product line. Several new hires had joined the team. Talented professionals who were excited to work in an environment that valued integrity over politics. 6 months ago, you watched me scrub toilets because someone with power decided I didn't deserve dignity. Some of you felt bad about it but stayed silent. Others participated in the humiliation. A few showed kindness despite believing I was powerless. I paused, letting that sink in. The difference between those 3 responses is the difference between a company that survives and one that thrives. Staying silent in the face of injustice enables evil. Participating in injustice makes you complicit, but showing kindness when you think it doesn't matter, that's the foundation of real leadership. The room was completely silent, but it was a different kind of silence than 6 months ago. This wasn't the uncomfortable silence of people watching abuse. It was the focused attention of people learning a lesson they'd never forget. Linda Morrison's career is over. Her reputation is destroyed. She faces potential prison time and millions in civil liability. That's what happens when you mistake cruelty for strength and fear for respect. I picked up a folder from the desk, Linda's old desk, which was now mine. But our work isn't finished. We've identified 12 other companies where former Linda associates work in management positions. We're going to make sure they understand what happened here and why. Over the next month, our story spread through business networks like wildfire. Harvard Business School asked me to speak about ethical leadership. Forbes featured our cultural transformation on their cover. Other companies began implementing similar reforms, using our model as a template. The most gratifying moment came when I received an email from a recent college graduate. Ms. Blackwood, I just accepted a position at a company that implemented your cultural framework. They told me that respect and dignity are core values, not perks to be earned. Thank you for proving that business can be both profitable and humane. But the real test came 6 months later, at the annual shareholders meeting. My father was presenting the year's financial results, and the numbers told an incredible story. Employee turnover is down 60%, he announced. Productivity is up 25%. Customer satisfaction scores have reached all-time highs. Most importantly, we've attracted top talent from across the industry, professionals who specifically chose to work here because of our culture. He turned to look at me in the audience. These results didn't happen by accident. They happened because we learned that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right, it's profitable. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. After the meeting, as I was packing up my presentation materials, an elderly woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Charlotte Blackwood?" she said with a slight accent. "I'm Elena Morrison, Linda's mother." My breath caught. This was not a conversation I'd expected or prepared for. "I came to thank you," she continued, tears in her eyes. "My daughter has been angry, cruel, and power-hungry for years. I watched her destroy relationships, hurt people, build her success on others' misery. I was ashamed of what she'd become." She reached into her purse and pulled out a newspaper clipping, the Forbes article about our transformation. "When she called me crying about losing her job, I thought you were just another victim of corporate politics. Then I read this article. I learned what she really did, how she really treated people. For the first time in years, someone held her accountable." Elena wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. "She's in therapy now. Real therapy. Not just anger management. She's finally facing what she became. It may be too late to repair all the damage, but it's not too late for her to become a better person." I didn't know what to say. I'd never considered the possibility that Linda's family might be grateful for her downfall. "She may never forgive you," Elena continued, "but I hope someday she'll thank you. You did what her family, her friends, and her colleagues should have done years ago. You stopped her." As Elena walked away, I realized that this was the true measure of justice. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about preventing future harm and creating the possibility for redemption. 6 months later, I received one final piece of correspondence related to the Linda Morrison case. It was a handwritten letter, postmarked from a small town in Ohio. "Charlotte," it began, "I know I have no right to contact you. I know I caused you pain that I can never undo. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I was. I understand the damage I caused, not just to you, but to dozens of people over the years. I'm working with a therapist, and I'm trying to make amends to the people I hurt. It's a long process, and most people don't want to hear from me. I understand that too. I wanted you to know that what you did, exposing me, stopping me, was the best thing that ever happened to most of the people I worked with, including me. I hope someday I can become the person I should have been all along. Linda." I read the letter 3 times, then filed it away. Some stories don't have neat endings with redemption and forgiveness. Some stories are just about stopping the harm and preventing it from spreading. But some stories do create the possibility for people to become better than they were. A year after my father's intervention, Blackwood Industries was named one of the best places to work by Fortune magazine. Our cultural transformation had become a case study in business schools. Other companies regularly sent executives to study our model. And me? I was exactly where I'd always planned to be, earning my place at the top of the company not through inheritance, but through proving that I could lead with both strength and compassion. The girl who once scrubbed toilets in secret had become a woman who changed how an entire industry thought about power, respect, and human dignity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do to someone who hurt you is to become so successful that their small-minded cruelty becomes irrelevant. And sometimes, justice looks like building something so much better than what came before that the old way of doing things simply can't survive. That's exactly what we did.